welcome to World History with Mr. Gaspaire. I am Mr. Gaspaire, and today we are going to be talking about Napoleon. No, not Napoleon Dynamite, but Napoleon the Conqueror, which is why, by the way, Mr. Gaspaire is dressed up as Kanye West. Because as many of you know, Kanye West definitely admires Napoleon. So I decided I would dress as Kanye in honor of his admiration. Let's go ahead and get started talking about Napoleon. So if we look down here, today's slide title is Napoleon's Rise and Fall. And he did rise and he fell. Oh, what a fell. There he is. Oh, what a stunning outfit. He looks great. Mr. Gaspaire, on the other hand, looks like a reject from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. It's really sad. This is the kind of budget that we're working with here. I'm spending about $5 on a costume that I found in the bins at Goodwill. This is good stuff. Okay, so let's take a look here, and we're going to be talking about Europe again, surprise, because it's Edgenuity, and approximately 1799 to 1815, thereabouts. We're going a little bit before that to talk about how Napoleon got into power, but that's about roughly his reign, okay, and what we're going to be discussing. Okay, and here is a map that says right there, the Napoleonic Empire. And Napoleon, in case you're unaware, came to power in France, even though he actually wasn't French per se, which we'll talk about in a second. And basically, Napoleon is kind of famous for being this very powerful, great general, military strategist who was able to essentially conquer all of continental Europe and even get into Russia a little bit. Don't mess with the Russians, kids. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. Here's a picture of Europe and the territories that Napoleon was able to secure. Okay, so here we go. Let's talk about Napoleon's rise to absolute rule. How did he become an emperor? Where did this guy come from? Again, as I pointed out, just kind of give a summary or an overview. Napoleon Bonaparte was a French military leader and eventually an emperor who conquered much of Europe in the early 19th centuries. So he basically started out from this small, smelly fishing village in Italy, okay? Corsica, actually. And Napoleon, believe it or not, spoke Italian. And spoke, when he eventually learned French, he spoke French with an Italian accent for most of his life, even though he eventually became Emperor of France. And you can kind of tell he was from a rural area. Just look at this haircut right here. Kids, that's what we call the Spanaway Sizzler. All right, he's got one of those meth and mud flat mullets that you would find in a wonderful location, perhaps like in Roy, Washington, for example. And there he is as a young lad, you can tell, coming up. And he basically kind of had a hard scrabble life and worked himself up from well, okay, his father was a nobleman, but kind of like a nobody nobleman. And eventually worked his way up to become the ruler of France. Okay, so how did that happen? Well, basically, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, or you read about, the French Revolution. And Napoleon is coming of age and coming to power in that time. He distinguishes himself during this time. So we mentioned this guy, Robespierre, and the Committee of Public Safety, which enacted a lot of what's known as the Reign of Terror, a lot of those choppy guillotine sorts of things that the French Revolution is famous for. Well, those guys eventually collapsed for various reasons. And when that happened, France was run by this thing called a Directory, it was a very sort of conservative body, which kind of came into power to sort of try and bring stability to France after the Reign of Terror and lots of chopping during the French Revolution. Okay, and it was controlled by 5 leaders. And Napoleon had been distinguishing himself in the French army as a military commander, winning battle after battle after victory, and the Directory was kind of unpopular, and Napoleon was able to basically take advantage of their unpopularity and seize power for himself. Okay, he was able to do that because Napoleon, believe it or not, believed in a lot of the Enlightenment principles. We talked about the Enlightenment quite a bit. We talked about it in an episode, and he believed in some of those ideas. Okay, and it says right there, Napoleon adhered to the Enlightenment principle that government that doesn't protect people's rights can be overthrown. That's what he used to justify this coup to take out this directory that was ruling France at the time. He basically, kind of made the argument that they weren't doing a good job, and he was sort of justified. And there was this kind of coup attempt to overthrow them, and he kind of weaseled his way into it and took power, basically. Okay, using that argument, hey, I should be able to take power because these guys, this directory, they're not doing a good job. Okay, because he then, it says right here, the next ingenuity question, Napoleon used the Enlightenment ideal that a government should protect the rights of its people to justify his removal of the directory in a coup d'etat. Coup d'etat, that's how you say that. Mr. Gaspaire's wonderful French. It's legendary. So yeah, he uses that argument. These guys are messing up. It says there in the Enlightenment. We talked about that. Locke mentioned that, if you remember. Locke, it's one of the things he disagreed with Thomas Hobbes, right? They both kind of, sought the necessity of a king. Locke says that the king messes up, you can get him. The directory wasn't a king per se, but they were messing up. And Napoleon uses that as an excuse and as an argument to overthrow them and gain power, okay? And by the way, coup d'etat, in case you don't know, is a sudden overthrow of an existing government. Okay, in other words, Napoleon kicked out the old government because he was running the military at this point in time, or at least the military in Paris, and was able to seize power and put himself into a position of power. Okay, so let's look here. There he is right there. And this is a scene, a painting from a scene of when that happened, when he went in and sort of announced himself as the leader. He almost didn't pull it off. His brother had to come in at the last second and save him. But he did it, okay? So he launched a coup. The director resigns, and one of the first things Napoleon does is basically he forms a military dictatorship. And it says right there, after the coup d'etat, the resignation of the directory, one of the first things Napoleon did was to form a military dictatorship, right? In other words, he gave himself all of the power. Now, he didn't do that outright at first, okay? As it says here, the most significant thing about Napoleon's new constitution was it gave Napoleon full control of government. He and 3 other people formed this thing called a consulate, basically, a consul, okay? Modeled after the old Roman government. And he in this constitution, sort of sets about a new French government. That's what a constitution is. It explains like the rules and laws that are in a government, in this case, the government of France. And he explains like what those rules are going to be. And he basically makes that constitution put himself as like what's called the first consul, right? There are 3 other peoples in this consulate, but really he's the guy who's in power, and it gives him full control of government. One of the things you're going to see in Ingenuity is this quote, and you have to analyze it, all right? So this is from that first consulate, those first 3 rulers, right, with really Napoleon ruling, and basically they said this: people of France, swear with us to be true to the republic, one and indivisible, founded on equality, liberty, and a representative system. Okay, so they're saying, French people, we are in charge now. You should swear allegiance to us. And you basically have to analyze, well, what's wrong with that quote? And it says here, quote, delivered by the consulate on November 12th, 1799. Mr. Gaspaire was about 15 years old at the time, having a good time as a paper boy in France. It was great fun. The problem with this quote was that a representative system wasn't created, a dictatorship was. So during the French Revolution, it was a very democratic revolution, as you recall, right? It's trying to give more power to ordinary people. They got rid of the French king, okay? And so Napoleon, in a sense, is going back. He wants to make himself the ruler. So he can't really just come out and say, I'm in charge now. I'm going to be the new king. So they kind of made it seem like, here's this new constitution. You people, you're going to be in charge. I'm just kind of executing and running things here, okay? So it makes it look like it's a representative system with people in power. But really, Napoleon is in charge. He's a clever guy, very tricky. And there they are. They kind of thought he was up to something at first, but he pulled it off anyway. Okay. And so when he was, he presented France. Okay, Napoleon's title when he presented France with the Napoleonic codes was first consul. Okay. We'll talk about the Napoleonic codes in a second, but at first, when he's taking power, he names himself first consul. It's like, it's an old Roman title back from the Roman Republic, like, it'd be like the most important position in government. It's not supposed to be a dictatorship. And again, he's pretending, I'm not a dictator, I'm just, I'm your public servant, I'm a big, powerful public servant. And he kind of disguises his rule, but really he's in command right away because he crucially controls the army. And to get to his credit, actually, at one point in time, he does open himself up to a vote of confidence by the French people, and he is very popular. He is elected. And in 1802, the French people voted to keep Napoleon in power, giving him the right to choose his successor, right? Even though they voted for him, he really was already in power, okay? And he further consolidates his power, gains more and more power, and then eventually he decides to crown himself emperor in 1804, okay? Goes from like military leader, first consul to like emperor, outright, I am in charge. And it says on Ingenuity, what was ironic about the 1804 crowning of Napoleon Bonaparte was that Napoleon crowned himself emperor. Look at that. Usually like a pope or somebody would come in and say, you're emperor. Napoleon's like, I don't need that noise. I'm just going to put my nice crown on. I'm going to make myself emperor. That's what he did. He's a do-it-yourself kind of guy, a DIY emperor. Okay, let's go. Here we are. And that was him in his nice, beautiful robes. What wonderful robes those were, too. Napoleon, and let's talk about now, so he's in control, and as the emperor, it's kind of weird, he actually kind of holds on to some Enlightenment ideals, right? In some sense, the Enlightenment is kind of against kings and queens. It's kind of a pushing back against that, more towards putting ordinary people in power, but not 100%. You can see that here, okay? Napoleon liked some of the ideals of the Enlightenment. He read a lot of Enlightenment philosophers when he was a young lad growing up in Corsica and speaking Italian and eating fish, presumably. So Napoleon, it says in Ingenuity, Napoleon believed in some Enlightenment ideals, but not social reform, okay? So, for example, what didn't he believe in, okay? He definitely did not give rights to women. He was very misogynistic. And in fact, he ended up taking away rights from women in that first French Constitution. Women couldn't own land. If you were a woman and you got a job, you couldn't even keep your money if you were married. It would go to your husband. And so women basically had no rights, couldn't vote, stripped them of that. So that's obviously, right, Enlightenment in theory is created off the ideal of like equality, although it does say all men are created equal. They weren't kidding. He doesn't believe that women should be reformed. That's one sort of, or extended rights. That's maybe one part of the Enlightenment that he says, no thanks, I won't take that. I'll do something else. So Napoleon, another thing that he does is he helps restore the Catholic Church in France by declaring Catholicism the official religion of France. You'll recall people like Voltaire, for example, in the Enlightenment, didn't like this idea. They thought it was a good idea to separate church and state, right? Separate the church and the government. This is one of the ways that Napoleon holds on to his power. He brings the Catholic Church back. The Catholic Church had been kicked out during the French Revolution. All of their lands had been taken in order to raise funds for the revolution. Napoleon gives that back to sort of shore up support, have a base of support, have the Catholic Church backing him so that he doesn't just have the military to keep himself in control, but he also has the backing of religion too. Okay? And at least initially that helps him. Okay. So those are two things that aren't very Enlightenment-esque. Nonetheless, again, he does support some of these ideas of the Enlightenment and actually ends up spreading them all over Europe. Okay, so what does he support? Well, the most likely reason why Napoleon could be classified as an Enlightenment monarch, like one of those absolute monarchs almost that we talked about, like Catherine the Great, was because he implemented certain Enlightenment ideals. Which Enlightenment ideals did he implement? Let's take a look. There he is right there. He's got the stomach scratching things. Mr. Gaspaire has that. Now if I got an itch, I can just reach in and go to town. It's great. He's got that here. That's him. This is a picture of him, by the way, when he was first consul there, okay, early on, before he was the emperor. So one action Napoleon took that showed he supported some Enlightenment ideals was to build schools and universities accessible to the middle class. Not women, but like, in some sense, ordinary people, merchants and things like that, had an opportunity to go to school in France. That's a big advancement, okay? So some of the Enlightenment things that he kept were trying to make government more rational and reasonable, stepping away from traditional structures and maybe basing things more based on science and rationality, okay? And you see that as he starts to build schools and universities all across France, and as he conquers Europe, these ideas are implemented in Europe too, different European countries as well. Okay, the name, the other thing he's famous for, this is probably his most lasting contribution, is he starts to standardize French laws, okay? Instead, French laws were kind of a mess before, and it's basically like the king stands on his throne and says, from now on, we're going to do the hokey pokey. Everybody do the hokey pokey. Whatever the king says, that went. So laws are a mess. He makes them clear. He makes the laws clear. He writes them down in something called the Napoleonic Code. That's kind of an Enlightenment thing because it's a rational approach to dealing with laws and things like that. And the name of the comprehensive set of laws passed by Napoleon was the Napoleonic Code. He makes this thing that's definitely kind of an Enlightenment idea, right? And again, with Napoleon, it's a mix, right? So he's taking away rights from women. He also, freedom of speech was limited under that Napoleonic Code. So it's more like a standardization of like measurements, the metric system. What's that? And like standardized property laws and things like that, which actually helps to modernize France, modernize most of Europe, allow for commerce and Europe to become very wealthy off of this standard set of laws, okay? So those are kind of the things that Napoleon contributes that's based on the Enlightenment, all right? And he spreads those ideas as he's conquering Europe. Now let's talk about the fall of Napoleon's empire. What brought him down? Well, obviously, he was cold. Look there. He's riding a horse or a donkey or something. It looks very cold. That's probably what happened. Actually, pretty close. So after becoming emperor, Napoleon planned to conquer other countries in Europe because he wanted to amass as much land as possible for France. And he does. He's very successful early on. In fact, he takes out basically all of continental Europe. And, it's basically poor Britain and poor Russia left to fight France, which is basically controlling everything at that point. Speaking of Britain, Napoleon's first defeat in his attempt to take over Europe was the Battle of Trafalgar. And basically, it's a naval battle in which he tries to invade England, and they quash him. This dude, Admiral Nelson, basically blows up Napoleon's fleet, sinks all the ships. Sorry, Napoleon. A contributing factor to Napoleon's defeat at the Battle of Trafalgar was that Napoleon enlisted Spain's help in forming a strong navy, but he was defeated anyway. So he had these big Spanish ships, but basically he sailed out in such a way that this admiral was able to cut through his ships and just blow them all to pieces, and he lost, even though he had the big ships with big guns. Pew, pew, pew. Won't always save you, kids. Then he tried to invade Russia, which actually he did very well, but the Russians were incredibly smart. And Napoleon would go into Russian territory, and the Russians would just say, ha-ha, and they would burn things down so that Napoleon's troops couldn't eat or survive or anything. In fact, Napoleon got all the way to Moscow, and Russia was just like, oh, you want Moscow? We're going to burn it down. There you go. So Napoleon's stuck all the way out in Russia, in Moscow, which is burned down. He has nowhere to house his troops, no food. They basically freeze to death in the Russian winter. Plus, I'm pretty sure, didn't the Russians have like bear cavalry or something? They probably had bear cavalry. So they're probably riding bears, drinking vodkas, and shooting the French. No, that's not true. It was the Russian winter that got them. It was too cold. Napoleon tries to go back to Poland. He starts with like 100,000 soldiers. By the time he gets back to Poland, there's like 40,000. Most of them had died and frozen to death. So that's kind of the downfall for Napoleon. Russia's defeat of France was the turning point in the Napoleonic Wars because Napoleon's empire turned against him. They don't like losers. We like the winners, folks. We love the winners. So let's talk about the fall of Napoleon's empire. So basically, Britain gets a hold of this guy, and they say, listen, you, don't do this again. No more conquering Europe. And they take him, and they capture him, and they send him to an island, Elba, and they say, don't do it again. You're going to stay there, and don't take over the world again. And he does it again, pretty much like Britney Spears. Oops, I did it again. He escapes from captivity, comes back to France, and tries to become emperor again. That's in 1815, after he was defeated, and he escapes in order to retake power as emperor and retain the empire. It doesn't work out. He's there for about 100 days as emperor again. This is a picture of him coming back, and they're all like, yay, you're back, Napoleon, and this dude's like, oh, Napoleon, I've missed you, and he's like, man, Carl, chill. All right, it's cool, I'm back. It's the most accurate description of Napoleon's 100 days with that Napoleon escaped from Elba, was defeated at Waterloo, a very famous battle, and was exiled one more time. That was the end of him. He was done. He ended up dying during his second exile. Never came back again. It was the end of his empire. Basically went too far, I guess. Tried to conquer too much. Got too big for his britches. So for Europe, the most positive result of the Congress of Vienna, so this is after Napoleon is captured, there's this Congress of Vienna that's going to try and put Europe back together, figure out what to do now that Napoleon's gone. They basically bring the kings back. That's what they do, right? Because it's kings, obviously, they want to take Napoleon out. Okay, all those old deposed kings, that's what took them out. For Europe, the most positive result of the Congress of Vienna was that the balance of power was restored. This balance of power was the idea that Europeans for the longest time wanted to keep each European country and kingdom strong enough to keep all the other ones in check. And that's kind of what they did. They put a French king back in that was powerful enough to keep, the Germans in check and Britain in check. And this balance of power lasted, roughly 200 years or so. Okay, they were able to keep the various European empires strong enough so that no one empire was able to dominate the others like Napoleon had just done. Okay, result of the peace conference that, is led by this Austrian guy, Metternich by Prince Metternich of Austria, nationalism began to grow and spread. Okay, so he's the guy, very conservative diplomat who's kind of making this thing happen. And actually, I kind of disagree with Edgenuity here. I think nationalism had begun to grow under Napoleon. As Napoleon had been conquering places, obviously people were like, man, I don't want to be ruled by the French. You French people suck with your onions and your baguettes. I don't want this. I want to be German, right? And that's basically what nationalism is. The best definition of nationalism is devotion and loyalty to one's country. And actually, as the French go about conquering these different places in Europe, even though they're maybe modernizing these countries, there's people resent that. They don't like being conquered by other countries, and it makes the German people begin to think of themselves as Germans and Italians as Italians. That's kind of what nationalism is, okay? So even though on Edgenuity it will say, result of the peace conference led by Prince Metternich of Austria, nationalism began to grow and spread. Even though that's the answer you're going to see on the quiz, I would suggest that it happened as Napoleon was actually conquering Europe. Okay, so that's it. That's all we've got time for today. That was Napoleon's rise and fall in a nutshell. If you have any questions, you can send them to bgaspai@tacoma.k12.wa.us, and we will see you next time.